Good morning, good afternoon, or as the case may be, good evening, and welcome to Distribution Strategy Group Best Practice Study 2025 State of Technology in Distribution. I'm Jonathan Bine. I'll be your host today, and I'm going to be sharing some results from a survey that we did with about 250 respondents on what you and your peers are doing with technology, both sort of current technology, course tech stack today, as well as what's coming over the next few years. First, I want to do a couple of announcements, including bringing our sponsors in. The AI conference for distributors, Applied AI for Distributors, is June 24 to 26th in Chicago, Illinois. It's right near Chicago O'Hare Airport. It's about a 5-minute Uber or cab ride. And the topics include designing an AI-enabled business, AI and distribution today, scaling responsible AI, speed networking, and many more. We've got an exciting lineup of speakers, including Noelle Russell, founder and CAO of the AI Leadership Institute. She was recently voted the #1 thought leader on agentic AI. We'll touch on that today briefly, by the way. Don Sarno, SVP of Digital Enterprise from Sonopar, and then Trent Gillespie, one of our keynote speakers from Stellus AI. You can go to appliedai4distributors.com, or you can scan the QR code. Next, I'd like to welcome Epicor and Sandy Lean as one of our sponsors for today's webcast. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, thanks, Jonathan. And thanks so much. We're just happy to be a sponsor today, especially when the topic is on technology. So Epicor, next slide. Epicor is here for the hardworking businesses that make, move, and sell. And when it comes to the move, your business, we've been in the distribution industry for over 50 years. We know your world, we understand distribution challenges, and we can help you solve them. In fact, when we ask new customers why they chose Epicor, the thing we hear most often is that we get them, and our software is the best fit for what they do right out of the box. Today, I'm excited to hear the findings from DSG's State of Technology research. I want to know how you're using emerging technology to drive efficiency, which channels you're integrating, and how you're using data tools to provide real-time insights into your business. At Epicor, we sell technology solutions that can do all of those things and more. Our ERPs can be one of the most effective ways to jumpstart your technology journey and use the power of innovative technology to maximize your business. As we speak, we're developing AI use cases for distributors with the leading companies in the world, like Microsoft, OpenAI, and Workato. Epicor's 50+ years of experience, combined with the latest AI technology and our industry data structure, can give your company what we call the insight advantage. As you listen to this webinar and think about your technology plans for 2025, think about Epicor. If you're in the market for new tools to support your growth, we'd love to talk. Jonathan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I'd like to welcome Wayne Dosher from Shopify.
Hey everyone, my name is Wayne Dozier. I'm from Shopify, and many of you know Shopify as a consumer platform. And when we first started 20 years ago, we were that. But now, 20 years into our journey, we are at global scale, running approximately 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. A 8,000 person company with 3,500 developers exclusively focused on commerce. And what we learned along from B2C along the way is now being applied to B2B. That's not to say that B2B shouldn't be like B2C, but things such as security and scale, supporting multiple channels is right at the heart of Shopify. Please, next slide, Jonathan. And, in terms of the types of organizations that are selecting Shopify, these are globally known brands, nationally known brands here in the United States. It includes Stanley Black & Decker, which is Mac Tools, Carrier, in terms of a very large HVAC manufacturer, and many other brands on the page. Shopify does credibly support very large catalogs with millions of SKUs, multiple business units, many channels, manufacturing, distribution, sell through, sell to, and we do support the complex interactions that B2B sellers expect. Quoting, configuration, and ultimately, B2B brands, please, next slide. And ultimately, B2B brands, choose Shopify because we reduce their cost of ownership. We can support these incredibly diverse go-to-markets. We, can really help increase conversion. We have the most performant checkout in the world. vastly outperforms other platforms. And that's not me saying that, that's credible third parties, saying that. And ultimately, we do provide very unique offerings for B2B, B2C, marketplaces, emerging fabrics. And the quotes along the bottom of the screen are B2B seller quotes, talking about the capability of Shopify to support their business. On the next slide, if you have any questions about Shopify, please use the QR code to get in touch. We'd be happy to share with you more about what our platform can do for you. And we'd also really like to learn from you. Please educate us, please challenge us, and please contact us. Thank you,
Thanks so
Jonathan.
much. Thanks so much, Dwayne. Delight to have you here as a first time. I'll look forward to seeing you again on future webcasts. Couple things upcoming from DSG briefly, how distributors use AI technology to drive sales effectiveness. We've got a panel next week with Chris Fisher from ECI, Zach Pretzel from Endeavor, Varun Sridharan from Infor, and Kristen Tom from White Cup. It should be a very rich discussion. And then the week after that, we're looking at measuring what matters, customer sat, market demand, and workforce performance. Ian and I will be co-hosting that, and that's sponsored by Distribution Strategy, Customer Experience RX, and Demand RX. Okay, and now into our webcast and presentation for today, State of Distributor Technology 2025. I want to start by saying there's a big role of AI in technology right now. Sandy alluded to how AI is making its way into what Epicor does. I'm sure it's also making its way into what Shopify does. And one of the speakers who was at both of our conferences, actually the keynote speaker, Zach Cass, who used to be at OpenAI, described a couple of key points in time about where AI is playing a role in technology. From now to 2027, we're going to be seeing enhanced applications like where AI becomes part of an application such as Epicor or some of the applications around Epicor, and same thing with Shopify and other technology companies. So we're seeing the infusion of AI in applications that we know. We're seeing better results from it. But Zach also described a period from 2027 to 2035 where he talked about autonomous agents, agentic, where the AI is actually doing things for you, where there's integration with all these different applications. It's not just in the application, but it's integration that can span across multiple applications, and that's a period that will be really significant for us. We're gonna touch on both of these in our discussion today, the enhanced applications such as what Epicor is doing now, and also we'll look at an autonomous agent at the end. Don't drop off before we hear that. There's some pretty exciting stuff coming there. Just one thing we look at, and then I'll move into the core state of technology stuff, is where AI is getting applied, and that's going to manifest in what we're seeing in the technology and adoption curves. So there's a lot going on in supply chain right now, purchasing, finance, cybersecurity. Those are more the future. The current ones are at the bottom: the website, digital, sales, marketing, customer service, HR, IT. So most of these things have more of a customer-facing flavor in terms of where the current applications are. Okay, let's talk about briefly the technology adoption curve, because that's going to be the basis for what we discussed today. You might have heard it. You might have heard the term innovator, early adopter, early majority. This term, this whole technology adoption curve is actually old. I think it's about 60 some odd years old at this point, although it was made famous by the guy who did Crossing the Chasm. And it characterizes where people are or companies are in adopting technology. So if there's a total market and only 2.5% of the market has adopted a given solution, it is described as being the innovator phase. If you're at up to about 16%, that includes the innovators and early adopters. And then that next stage where you cross the chasm is what's known as the early majority. So there's another third or 34% that form the early majority. And these folks are that are adopting in that stage are known as being pragmatic, and they view it that they need to keep up with competition. The next sort of mirror stage is the late majority. People adopt and they know they have to. That's also another third of the market. And then finally, the laggards, those who are skeptical, with limited resources, education, vision, priority, et cetera. Adoption often lags what distributors say is important, and distributors are not known for being big technology adopters. So I'm going to focus this discussion today from a technology adoption curve on really two parts of the business: the external facing, customer facing, sales, marketing, customer service, and then the internal facing, supply chain, warehouse, et cetera. This is based on a survey that we did where we asked people where they were with applying different technologies. And some said they're either they have deployed these technologies or solutions, or they are in the process of deploying those. And so that forms I guess that would be an amber color of where a given technology is today. But then the green reflects where the technology may be in 3 years. To be clear, in any survey that is done, there is a bias in who takes the survey. So the people that took this survey are probably a little bit more tech advanced than the rest of the market. So these numbers might look large, but that's why, because there's a bias in who takes our survey. I want to talk about a few in detail later on, but I'm going to say a couple things about the automated product selectors and configurators. Actually, Dwayne mentioned this in one of the things that Shopify does. And this is making its way into e-commerce sites for increasing really the complexity of the transactions that get done online. If we look at a simple MRO style purchase, that's really where e-commerce started out in the B2B world. We could include office supplies in there. There's not much configuration that's being done. But as we start to move into more complex equipment or products that are being sold, that's where an automated product selector and configurator comes in. According to the response from our survey, about a quarter of companies are doing this today. And then by 2028, it's showing that well over just about 2/3 will be doing it in 2028. Again, there's a bias in our response, but I think this shows directionally what's happening, which is these are starting to get traction in a very serious way. And we know this from our work with other distributors and manufacturers who are getting configurators into their distributor websites. One of the terms that we talk about now is agentic. I'm going to talk about that later on. These are virtual agents. The stuff that's happening today with virtual agents is just above the warm body level in terms of who's deploying it. But it's fully within reason of the time frame that we said that by 2028, a significant portion of distributors will be using intelligent virtual agents. So we'll talk more about that later on. Another technology that Ian Heller and I have researched and commented on over the years is visual search. So if you think about like a Google Lens or something where you point a cell phone at a camera, well, that technology has really progressed significantly. Companies are starting to deploy it as a way of doing search for products. Again, we're at barely into the early majority now, and it's showing that by 2028, it'll be right between early majority and late majority. So a powerful means of doing search when words are not convenient or an easy way to describe what's going on. We've also talked about AI-based cross-selling over the years. And this has been a holy grail for distributors. There's a general idea that if we're a distributor, we're selling a customer only a portion of what they could buy from us. And a lot of times they don't know what are the range of things they could be buying from us. In fact, they may have us pegged for a certain product category and be getting from other suppliers things that we already sell. There have been various efforts at AI-based cross-selling, but starting a few years ago, using AI, a number of companies are offering very effective cross-sell solutions that are giving 5, 6, 7% lift, whether used by agents or online or both. They're giving them a material sales lift based on the AI cross-selling. Also being used to drive reordering as well as the cross-selling. So sometimes the process of reordering is going to and having a systematic way to drive that is going to generate more revenue than cross-sell. It'll depend on your business, but that AI playing a role there is huge, and we're showing a large appetite for that between now and 2028. One that we're going to focus on more is the AI-based order and quote automation. And this category has really emerged quite significantly in the last 18 months. I literally hear about a new company about once a month that's doing this. So we're in the stage of proliferation of companies doing this technology and also being venture funded, by the way. I've got an interesting demo, and I'll show some more detail on this in a moment. Another one that's very interesting in terms of the value it provides to a distributor is what's known as the automated order to cash. And essentially that involves AI not only handling invoices, but reconciling invoices back to payments back to invoices, I should say. I had it backwards. And that has a couple of significant benefits. There's the reduction in days sales outstanding. You get cash quicker. You might shave 2 to 5 days off of the payment cycle, which is material. You're going to get better efficiency. You free up people to do higher level functions who are otherwise spending time reconciling payments with invoices. Very tedious and not fulfilling form of work. As a technology, there are many companies that do this right now. I mean, there's a huge proliferation of these companies. There are a few that have made it into, a material portion of the distribution market. But this is definitely one that distributors should be deploying. And we're showing that by 2028, we'll be almost into the laggard stage of adoption there. And then finally, another area that Ian and I have looked at over the years is the voice command for placing orders, Alexa, Siri, et cetera. That's the furthest behind here. The arrival of generative AI, large language models, the kinds of things that you see in ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, pick your LLM, is going to change this very rapidly. This will also go along with the virtual agents. So we're finally showing that starting to get traction. I should mention, by the way, if you have questions, there is a Q&A button, and I'll do my best to answer them. So let's talk briefly about the invoicing and payment problem, the order to cash. At the heart of the order to cash problem is a matching problem, which is something that technology and particularly AI technology does very well. You've got a payment and you've got any number of orders and any number of invoices and orders from a given customer. Right now, that reconciliation or that matching problem is done manually. And so if you're a $100 million distributor, you might have 2 to maybe even 3 FTE, full-time equivalents, spending time doing this matching and reconciliation. As it shows here, about half of it, the invoicing is still on paper, and there's a material cost to even process an invoice. So there's a cost to create an order, there's also a cost to create an invoice. And there's often a lag involved. About a quarter of the cases involve some kind of exception handling. So a lot of elbow grease going into invoicing. There are errors, there's lower productivity, there are time delays. The automated invoicing, particularly with AI doing the matching and reconciliation, can take out about 4/5 or 80% of the overall invoice processing costs. You can get about a 70% faster invoice processing and approval times, fewer errors, which creates a better customer experience. And then you'll have a better visibility into what's happening with your invoices. Um, Other indirect benefits, you're getting things to be more touchless. You're able to grow, you're able to scale without growing headcount as much. And there's the ability to perform higher level functions for the people that are doing this. Another area that we've seen really gain traction recently is the quote and order automation, or also called service order automation. And the big idea with this is that it takes a lot of time to take orders or to create a quote. So there's a class of technology today, service order orchestration, service order automation, quote order automation, whatever you want to call it, that can look at emails that you're receiving and determine whether it's an order that's being placed either in the body of the email or as an attached PDF or Excel file or even a Word document. And if it's an order, it will go ahead and place the order for you into your ERP. And if it's a quote request, it will do the front end of populating a quote. By the way, there's a question from the audience. We'll be sending out this recording post-webinar. So if you need to leave now, I hope you don't, but if you do, the full recording will be available post-webinar. The process of quote and order management today is really laborious and takes a lot of time for people. This is another one where if this time can be freed up for higher level function, it's a win for the individual employee as well as the organization. There are errors. It's slow, particularly on the quote turnaround. By the way, there's often a scenario where the fastest quote wins. So this AI-based quote and order automation can take input, not just from email, which is where I started, but it can take it from voice, it can take it from text, it can take a variety of different formats of communications. And part of what it does is it's able to understand the intent, even if there's not a lot of detail in a particular order. One of the ones that Canals.ai likes to use is somebody sends an order for a big can of PVC glue. Okay, well, there's probably a lot of things that could be described as a big can of PVC glue. But when somebody is specifying that in their order or in their quote request, notice that there's not a brand or a SKU present in that description. So the challenge is to go from big can of PVC glue, in that case, to a specific item, and then to check inventory, to do all the things that would be necessary to be able to place an order or generate a quote. This AI-based quote and order automation is using information from your product information management. It's using all kinds of transaction data. Some of the best ones are using pricing intelligence, meaning looking at what your competitor pricing is. They're looking at availability intelligence. They have the ability to check availability of the SKU for your competitors, but also for yourself, to be able to look in, let's say you're in San Antonio, or the quote's coming from San Antonio. How is our inventory in San Antonio? What do we need to do to be able to fulfill this? So this is really powerful in terms of freeing up time. I'll give an example here of the order automation, and this is where it comes in the body of an email. There's about 14 lines here from Matthew, the project coordinator in a place in New Jersey. And he's given a contact, and this is actually a pretty good order. But again, there's no SKU number here for a lot of these. So what happens with the order automation, this is essentially what would be queued up before it gets put into the ERP, is it does reconcile or ground all of these things to specific items that can then be placed as an order. Okay, I'm gonna go into a different share mode here. Let's see, let's just share my desktop. Yes, and we'll go back here. Okay, so this is a live example of voice ordering.
Thank you for calling Palmer Donovan. Please listen carefully as your menu options have changed. For bill, please note that your call may be recorded for quality assurance or training purposes.
Thank you for calling Palmer Donovan. This is Sarah.
Yes, this is Roger, Glandorf Lumber.
Yeah, what can I do for you?
I need to place an order for some truss core parts, pieces.
Okay, and is the color white?
Yes, this is all white.
Okay,
I need 18 pieces, 16 feet long.
okay, got it.
6 pieces, 20 feet long.
Okay,
7 pieces, 10 feet long.
okay,
3 pieces, 12 feet long.
okay,
11 pieces of the J channel.
okay.
And 2 pieces, he's calling it an H channel.
There's a snap-in H channel kit.
Yep. That's
Okay.
the one.
Okay, anything else?
I think that'll do.
Okay, all of that is in stock. What do you want to use as your PO?
Ken Steckschulte.
Ken Steckschulte.
Ken, as in K-E-N, Steckschulte.
Okay. All right, well, that will.
Okay, so what's significant about this is that the voice from the customer is what's driving things being filled in the quote call here. So the customer mentions they're from Glandorf Lumber. They mention the name is Roger. They mention the SKUs. They mention the quantity, and all of that is being automatically populated into this quote request. And so that's part of the power of where we're going with some of this AI quote and order automation. On the whole, the benefits of AI-based quote and order automation are very material efficiency and productivity gain, reduction in errors, and an increased win rate. I want to shift now to talk about what we're seeing in the supply chain, warehouse, and logistics world in terms of technology. We looked at 6 different technologies that distributors are using. And broad comment, these are at an earlier stage of adoption than the customer-facing technologies that I showed before. So the AI for inventory or warehouse use, about a fifth of the respondents are doing something today, showing it will get to that late majority stage by 2028. The RFID for tracking inventory and assets, also at about a fifth of the respondents, will stay in the early majority phase even by 2028. If we look at technology to improve the flow of goods in the warehouse, just now crossing over into the early majority, warehouse robots at an earlier stage and I'm going to show some examples of those, are now at an 8%. So that's still at the early adopter phase. And remember, this set of respondents, the people that took the survey, are probably further ahead technologically. So even those who are further ahead, it's showing only 8% are using warehouse robots. There's a lot of different kinds of warehouse robots. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then the pick to light, put to light, the voice pick, the so-called voice pick, also at a much lower adoption today, and a lower adoption in 2028 than most of the other technologies. A final piece about the other technologies, the drone and autonomous vehicle delivery. That's something we've been tracking for a few years, and it's very, very early. The economics are just not there for this yet. They're, at least for a B2B kind of a payload that would go on a vehicle of one kind or another. If you think about the things you've seen with FedEx, they're carrying really a payload that would be fit for a B2C environment. So we don't see huge traction on this between now and 2028. But at some point, it will hopefully get to a meaningful price performance point where people can adopt it and use it. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in supply chain optimization. We've all lived through the horrors of COVID and what that did to the supply chain. And there's actually technology now that can really, really ameliorate, really improve a lot of the outcomes. In a nutshell, the supply chain optimization challenge boils down to a bunch of who, what, where, how, why, when questions that you need answers to. So these are particularly about a SKU. When do I buy it? Where do I put it? How much of it do I need? What do I need? Where do I need it? These questions need to be answered to minimize the need for working capital, but also to improve the service levels that you're able to deliver, the fill rates. And those two things are traditionally viewed as being as a trade-off with one another. If we look at what's going on with some of the algorithms today, there are adaptive algorithms that are able to cluster products into different categories. For example, you might be looking at slow moving or new products or items with volatile demand. So there are adaptive algorithms that are able to really take this into account. And that's one of the powers of these so-called AI enhanced applications. Is you've got a traditional application, which is forecasting. Okay, great. Now let's inject AI into it and get a better result. One of the things that these new algorithms can do, or these new AI approaches, is they can take into things like product life cycle. They can take into account what's happening with weather or seasonality, or they can take into account erratic events, including promotions. So they're able to look at a much broader set of things than just a simple statistical approach. The net result of this is that you can take a more granular focus on distribution across products, locations, and customers. And this is the key to getting the following benefits. First, a minimum 5% increase in fill rates. And that sounds like a really dramatic number, but it is achievable with some of these new technologies. And then also a minimum 5% lower inventory or working capital. Also a dramatic benefit. So really getting the best of both worlds using this AI-based supply chain optimization. I wanted to talk next about a warehouse application that is really important and challenging, which is the inventory cycle counting. Some people have gone to this as an approach to managing inventory because you're getting an ongoing update. But there's a number of challenges in doing inventory cycle counting. that are shown here. It is labor intensive. There are occupational health and safety risks. My colleague Ian Heller was telling me about climbing to the top of a warehouse to look at something on a ladder. This cannot be good for us. So, in addition, there's downtime required for people to do this. You can get stock that ages out and has to be written off. And it's not always that accurate because there's a lot of potential for human error. So there's a technology to reduce the cycle count times in the warehouse. I'm going to play a brief video here.
Today we want to talk about how effective drone cycle counting is in the warehouse. But before I dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about what the drone does in the building and how we're able to use that to benefit. The first thing is that the drone sees the physical product in the location, so it's taking a picture of the actual location. It's also looking at space utilization. So how much space is the pallet in that position taking up? And it's then making a determination of the case count based on the boxes that it sees. Also, it's scanning the barcode, whatever barcode it may see, whether it's a master UPC carton, maybe it's an LPN on a pallet, or an identifier that we put on it inbound. It can take all of that information and then compare it back to the WMS. Now that we know a little bit more about how the drone works and what we're able to see, I want to talk about the benefits. The first thing I want to highlight is that this drone is able to look at locations in a matter of seconds. We're not having to purchase material handling equipment such as cherry pickers, and we're not having to train additional personnel on how to use those, as well as our WMS. The drone is able to upload the information it sees and then make a comparison for us and send that back to us. It effectively can flag a problem before we even know we have it. One of the other benefits is reduced cycle count times in the warehouse. What I mean by that is the drone isn't able to see what's inside of open cases, but it can easily identify how many full pallets you have for a SKU, so you don't have to send an associate out there to actually pick that product and look at it. You also don't have to query the location and see what items should be there. The drone is able to do all of that for us. It also prevents stops further down the line, such as if a product isn't available for replenishment, maybe a lot isn't in the correct location, or maybe the product is completely missing, and we're able to catch that before the customer even sends us an order.
Okay, so here's the readout on that in terms of the overall benefits. One, you're getting much more accurate stock. You're getting much more accurate stock counts, and it's up to date. It's about 10 to 20 times more efficient. You're reducing operational downtime, and then you get that increased safety. So definitely one to consider. The next thing I want to talk about is more general robotics in the warehouse. And there's a lot of different types of warehouse robots. Literally, we could do a webinar or two or three just on that. One that you may be familiar with are what are known as automated guided vehicles, AGVs. And these work along a predetermined path using markers, wires, or magnetic strips. It's a little bit like a train track that these operate on. They use fixed routes to transport materials and products. And if you change your warehouse layout, you likely have to change the layout of these tracks. They don't have the flexibility of AMRs, but they are, at least today, often a more cost-effective approach. For things that are very repetitive, this is a good value. But the autonomous mobile robots are really the next wave of things, and they can do a much broader set of tasks. First of all, they can go anywhere in the warehouse pretty much. They figure out their own efficient paths through the warehouse. They avoid obstacles, for example, like people automatically. And you can see that they can be used for picking, packing, and transporting items. So that's a wider range of tasks than what a lot of the other robots can do. As you change your warehouse, you don't have to change the AMR. So here's an example of some AMRs in a distribution setting. Okay, so a couple things to notice about this. One is, again, you saw they're able to go anywhere, and they're quite skillful in what they do. When we look at the numbers, the financials on these kinds of robots, people often will look at a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 robot to picker ratio, robot to person ratio. So you could see a break even within 2 to 3 years if you had a 3-to-1 robot to picker ratio. The numbers are going to get better between now and the end of the decade. In other words, these are going to become more affordable. Price performance is going to become better depending on how you want to look at it. The benefits of the AMR is the autonomy. They're using sensors and cameras, very, very high picking accuracy. That's a super, super high rate. You can look at 450 to 500 picks per hour with these kinds of AMRs. They can go anywhere they need to go in a warehouse or DC. You can scale up as you need more, and they cost less than conventional systems. So these are coming soon in a way that's going to be affordable for a broader range of distributors. Next thing I want to talk about is agentic AI. Again, according to Zach Cass, as I laid out at the beginning of the presentation, the agentic AI timeframe is 2027, starting in 2027. And I think there's really a couple of aspects to listing that as a timeframe. One, when will the technology be ready? Two, when will distributors be ready? Or when will the deployers of this technology be ready? The 2027 feels like the right timeframe to me independently. So I was happy to see that Zach had come up with that timeframe. Let's talk a little bit about what agentic AI is. Agentic AI refers to AI systems that act autonomously on behalf of users. They can go work across multiple applications without continuous human input. They are capable, and this is a big word, of autonomous decision making. So this is not the asking ChatGPT a question and getting a mind-blowing answer. I mean, they're actually working on things. They're doing planning. They can do goal-directed things. Here's how they differ from the AI that you may be using today if you're working with large language models or Gen AI tools like ChatGPT or Gemini. Those tools that you're using, they operate reactively, but the agentic AI is proactive, and it can look at a variety of things that are happening within your supply chain, your customer needs, and your business objectives. Within wholesale distribution, there's a few really key applications of the agentic AI. One is the autonomous supply chain management, which is really important, predicting demand fluctuations, reordering stock as necessary, making sure inventory levels are sufficient to meet customer demand. But then the other things that I think are really interesting are really the proactive customer engagement. And this could be in the customer service inside sales rep type of function. So this could be they're taking an order, like the example I showed before. I'm going to show another example soon. It could be they're handling returns. They're helping to formulate a solution because they are smart enough and they've seen what kind of solutions work. So this whole proactive customer engagement is a really big direction for agentic AI. And then on the supplier side, looking at the negotiation of supplier contracts, optimal terms, and compliance with the company policies. The big implications for this in wholesale distribution, really massive increase in productivity and efficiency. So we can imagine doing way more with the same resource that you have now. So let's say 2025, you've got 200 employees. 2030, you've got 200 employees, but you're doing way more because of this enhanced productivity. Getting better results in terms of accuracy, and also just the ability to scale. If you think about what happens when you bring an employee on board, there's a learning curve. There's a bunch of things that have to happen before that employee is productive. This is immediate scalability, and also they can integrate very smoothly with other AI agents and human workers, often giving more agile and responsive counsel. So at some point, the agentic AI will result in autonomous supply chains. It's not if, it's when. I don't know if it's this decade, but we'll start to see steps towards that in this decade, where parts of the supply chain are significantly influenced or driven by agentic. We'll see the revenue growth, whether it's in the customer service function or in the pure sales function. We're going to see the workforce productivity, where the people, instead of doing repetitive tasks, are going to be taking higher level function or strategic roles. And all of this is going to drive a competitive advantage that is significant. So I want to show a demo where the voice that you hear is actually agentic AI. So we've got a technology where somebody is speaking. That's on the video, but the voice that you hear is the agentic AI. I think I need to go to the next slide. So again, the voice that you hear is the agentic AI, and notice how natural it sounds.
Hey there, Vic here. How may I help you today?
Hey, I was looking for an adhesive to bind together metal pipes for my construction project, and it's kind of under high temperature and high pressure conditions. So do you have anything in stock for that?
Absolutely, I can help with that. For high temperature and high pressure conditions, I'd recommend our high temperature silicone adhesive. It's specifically designed to bond materials under extreme conditions, making it perfect for pipes that experience a lot of heat and pressure. We also have the industrial epoxy adhesive, which is great for heavy duty applications as well. Could you share a bit more about your project? Are you looking for something more for a temporary fix or something more permanent?
Yeah, definitely looking for something more permanent. It's a long-term project.
Sounds like the high temperature silicone adhesive would be a solid choice for you then, especially since it's built for durability in heated and pressurized environments. We also have a high temperature gasket kit that could complement your project by providing an additional sealing solution. Do you think that might be helpful as well?
Not for now, thank you.
No problem at all. Let's get started on your order. Could you please provide me with your supplier or company name?
Yeah, it's ABC Construction, and our address is 1893 Johnson Avenue, Berkeley, California.
Great, thank you. Now, could you confirm the product you'd like to order? Just to double check, is it the high temperature silicone adhesive?
Yep.
And how many units? Perfect. How many units of the high temperature silicone adhesive would you like to order?
27, please.
Got it. 27 units of the high temperature silicone adhesive. Now, could you let me know the expected delivery time frame?
Yeah,
When do you
sure.
need this delivered?
Pretty urgent. I need it on the 20th of February by around 6 p.m. in the evening.
Thanks for that detail. So just to recap, we have ABC Construction, high temperature silicone adhesive, 27 units, 1893 Johnson Avenue, Berkeley, California, February 20th by 6 p.m. I'll check the stock availability for you and proceed with processing your order. Is there anything else you'd like to add or ask?
That's it. Thank you.
Give me a moment. I've confirmed that we have enough stock. So here's the final order details. ABC Construction, high temperature silicone adhesive, 27 units, 1893 Johnson Avenue, Berkeley, California.
Thank you.
February 20th.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was pretty cool. I think there are parts of it that we could critique as not quite sounding perfectly natural, but that was pretty good. And you can see that with polish, that's going to get to a very exciting level, probably within the year. And I don't know that a lot of distributors are ready to make that leap yet, but you see the potential of where this can go with agentic AI. And again, there's other use cases of handling returns, checking inventory, checking an invoice, delivery status. All of those things could be handled with agentic AI, whether it's a voice like that or whether it's more of a chat type of an interaction. So I want to share a couple things in conclusion. As you know, my background is in technology, or some of you may know that, and so I clearly lean towards the use of technology as being important for distributors. I think we're at a point now where between now and the end of the decade, we're going to see companies that deploy technology, the right ERP like Epicor, the right e-commerce system like Shopify. The companies that deploy this technology are going to get significant advantage over other distributors that are not deploying this technology. I think that the early adopters of this technology, meaning that are taking advantage of it now and that are building towards 2030, will see at least a 30 to 40% efficiency gain across your biggest functions. And that includes inside sales, customer service, sales, warehouse, and drivers. And in addition to the efficiency gains, there will also be better customer experience that you're delivering. So it's, you've got the cost side, you've got the benefit side. You're delivering better benefit to your customers in form of the experience they have. And then your cost for delivering that is going to be much lower. And that will manifest as much higher revenue per employee or much higher gross profit. Pick your metric per employee. The companies that are getting on this now are going to see those benefits between now and the end of the decade. And a really key part of this is that we're not waiting for these technologies to appear. Many of them are available right now and will get better. If we just look at that customer service inside sales track, the quote and order automation can give you a 20 to 30% efficiency gain right now. This agentic AI that I just showed you, which might be more ready in that 27, 2028 timeframe, probably another 30, 40% productivity benefit. So we're not waiting for these technologies. They can be deployed starting soon and now. The bottom line for all of this is a better bottom line. Imagine if you're doing 30 to 40% more revenue with the same in 2040 with the same resource that you have today. Well, that's a much greater profitability. You would have the potential at 30 to 40% greater efficiency than your competitors to actually even lower prices somewhat and to actually still to make more money than you were making before, which will increase volume. So there's really compelling reasons that people need to get going now with this to be sitting in 2030 with your competitors that have 30 to 40% more efficiency and you don't is not an outcome that I think most of you are going to want. Okay, well, we got a couple more things here. I think that's the end of our show. So thank you for attending State of Distributor Technology 2025, and we'll have the recording out within the next 24 hours, and have a wonderful rest of your day.